Welcome to infinite history stories. Beneath the bustling skylines and glass towers of our modern world lies a silent, dark reality that most have forgotten. For millennia, humanity hasn't just built upward toward the light. We have carved music deep into the crust of the planet, creating vast empires that mirror the complexity of any surface city. These are the massive, forbidden cities found beneath the earth, subterranean urban centers that once housed tens of thousands of people underground. From the volcanic tuff of Italy to the arid steppes of Kazakhstan, ancient engineers utilized a radical concept known as negative space architecture. Here, the removal of material was as critical as the construction of it, turning solid stone into schools, kitchens, temples, and homes. The scale of these sites is staggering. Music, with some reaching 18 stories deep, featuring sophisticated ventilation shafts and modular living quarters that rival modern apartment complexes. But the existence of these places poses a haunting question. Why did entire civilizations, separated by oceans and eras, decide to abandon the open air to migrate into the stone? Whether driven by the threat of total war, extreme climatic shifts, or sacred ritual, these subterranean empires were built to endure. They were not mere temporary shelters. They were permanent engineered solutions to an impossible survival crisis. So sit back, grab a snack, and join us as we peel back the layers of the earth to investigate the who, what, and how of the world's most mysterious underground locations. Our exploration begins high above the Paglia River Valley in central Italy, where the city of Orvieto sits atop a massive pedestal of volcanic tuff. While the medieval architecture on the surface is visually striking, the true engineering marvel is the shadow city that exists within the plateau itself. Over 200 tunnels, galleries, and cellars are interwoven into the stone, creating a subterranean empire that was utilized for over 2,500 years. The history of this hidden city begins with the ancient Etruscans, who first realized that the geological properties of their home offered a unique opportunity for industrial-scale expansion. This foundation of compacted volcanic ash, known as tuff, settled over the landscape millions, of years ago, following massive eruptions in the nearby Bolsa region. For ancient builders, the material was ideal. It is soft enough to be worked with simple hand tools like picks and chisels. Yet, it undergoes a process of hardening when exposed to air. This meant that soon as a room was carved, it began to structurally stabilize itself, allowing for a vertical expansion that mirrored the streets above. As space on the surface became a premium, the citizens simply moved their infrastructure into the dark. While the medieval streets above are a labyrinth of narrow alleys, the subterranean world was organized around utility and survival. For a long time, it was assumed that these spaces were merely used as temporary shelters. But the Orvo Underground project has revealed a much more complex reality. The residents moved entire segments of their economy into the stone, converting the depths into primary sites for food, music, production. The olive oil industry in particular was a subterranean powerhouse. Because the caves maintained a constant temperature of about 15 degrees Celsius, they provided the ideal environment for storing oil without it turning rancid. Archaeologists have found the remains of massive grindstones and settling tanks carved directly into the floor. These presses were powered by animals that were lowered into the depths, working in the cool air to process the harvest brought in from the surrounding valleys. The engineering of these rooms included intricate drainage channels to manage the olive press cake and liquid waste, ensuring that the industrial process did not contaminate the living quarters nearby. The pigeon breeding chambers, or calaria, were even more specialized. These rooms were lined with hundreds of small square niches carved into the walls where birds could nest. Because the plateau of Orvo is naturally defensible but resource-poor, these birds provided a constant source of protein that did not require grazing land. The engineering here was remarkable. Builders carved small angled openings leading to the cliff faces. These holes were large enough for pigeons to fly in and out, but small enough to prevent larger predators from entering. This allowed the city to maintain a self-replenishing food, source that was entirely protected from any enemy who might be surrounding the city on the ground. The history of these tunnels is also deeply tied to the Etruscan mastery of water. Long before the medieval city existed, the Etruscans engineered a system of caniculi, narrow, tall tunnels used to drain land and manage groundwater. These tunnels were carved with a slight consistent gradient to move water to central systems. When the Romans eventually conquered the region, they were so impressed by this music, hydraulic logic, that they incorporated it into their own urban designs. Even today, these ancient drainage channels continue to protect the Orvieto Plateau from internal erosion, channeling rainwater away from the structural foundations of the surface buildings. The logistical foresight of these builders, music, reached its peak in the 16th century with the construction of the Pozzo di San Patrizio, music, or St. Patrick's Well. Following the sack of Rome in 1527, Pope Clement III fled to Orvieto. Fearing a long siege, music, he commissioned the architect Antonio da Sanangalo the Younger to create a secure water source. Sanangalo designed a well that reaches 62 meters into the earth, cutting through the strata to reach music, a natural spring. The well's double helix staircase is a masterclass in spatial geometry. It consists of two separate spiral ramps that wind around the central shaft, but never, music, intersect. This allowed pack animals to carry heavy water jars down one staircase and back up the other in a continuous loop. By preventing the animals from meeting, Sangalo eliminated the risk of accidents in the narrow, dimly lit shaft. Each staircase is lit by 72 windows cut into the central wall, allowing light from the surface to penetrate, music, deep into the shaft. Beyond the economic hubs, the tunnels served as a sprawling defensive network. Hidden passageways lead from private basements directly to the valley floor below. These, music, escape routes were designed to be invisible to anyone standing on the surface, allowing the entire population to vanish at a moment's notice. Some of these tunnels were so narrow and winding that a single defender could hold off a squad of invaders, utilizing the darkness and the acoustic resonance of the stone to their advantage. The tunnels also served a practical, if darker, purpose as medieval waste disposal, music, systems known as booty. For the modern archaeologist, these pits are a goldmine of information. Because they were sealed for centuries, they contain perfectly preserved layers of discarded ceramics and tools. These items have allowed researchers to reconstruct the daily lives, diets, music, and trade connections of Orvieto's citizens from the 13th century through the Renaissance. Music. The artifacts found within show that even in times of extreme isolation, the people of the underground city were part of a sophisticated Mediterranean trade network. Recent mapping using LAR technology has allowed researchers to see through the solid rock in ways previous generations never could. The Orvieto Underground Project has uncovered previously unknown connections between music, these private tunnels, and the central city labyrinth. This data suggests that the entire plateau was music, treated as a single modular piece of architecture. In some areas, the stone walls between tunnels are only a few centimeters thick, suggesting that the builders knew exactly where their neighbors were excavating. This implies a level of civic coordination and surveying that was previously thought unlikely for the era. The scans have even identified breakthrough walls, sections of stone that were intentionally left thin so they could be quickly breached in an emergency to link separate tunnel systems. This reveals a city that was constantly being re-engineered, music, and adapted to the political realities of the time. The transition from a storage site to a fully functioning subterranean economy represents a level of urban planning that was far ahead of its time. As we examine the silent, cool chambers beneath the streets of Orvieto, we see more than just a series of caves. We see a civilization that viewed the earth as a secondary territory to be conquered and shaped. The citizens lived a dual existence, moving between the sunlight of the piazzas and the music, engineered silence of the tunnels. It was a lifestyle defined by the stone, music, where the safety of the population was bought with the labor of the excavators who carved their legacy into the volcanic foundations. Moving north from the structured economic labyrinth of Italy, we enter the Picardy region of northern France, where the landscape hides a subterranean empire born of necessity. Known as the Mushes of Nor, this network of tunnels was carved into a massive limestone plateau, creating a hidden city capable of concealing 3,000 people. While the residents of Orvieto carved their world for trade and industry, the builders here were driven by the reality of the 30 Years' War and a succession of invasions that ravaged the surface for centuries. In Niort, the earth was not a resource for production, but a sanctuary where an entire village could vanish in plain sight. The engineering of Niort is defined by a commitment to invisibility. To prevent the smoke from thousands of cooking fires from revealing the location of the hiding place, they use smoke detectors. The builders designed an intricate ventilation system of narrow chimneys. These smoke holes were strategically placed to emerge amidst the dense foliage of the forest above or through the existing chimneys of the village houses on the surface. To a passing army of raiders, the thin wisps of smoke appearing in the woods seemed like natural mist rather than the breath of a hidden population. This allowed the community to maintain a functioning society, complete with bakeries and communal kitchens, while soldiers marched feet above their heads. The scale of the complex is a testament to the organizational skills of the local peasantry. The network consists of 28 galleries, stretching over 2 kilometers, containing nearly 300 individual rooms. These chambers were organized into distinct neighborhoods, where families from the surrounding areas were assigned specific quarters. Archaeologists have identified communal spaces that served as stables for livestock, small chapels for worship, and even a central town square where the village elders would meet to coordinate their defense. This was a modular society that could be activated at a moment's notice. When the church bells signaled a threat, the population would retreat into the limestone and seal the entrances. Historical records suggest that the peak usage of Niors occurred during the 17th century, a time when Pica was a frequent battlefield for French and Spanish forces. The villagers became so adept at subterranean living that they developed a sophisticated internal economy. They didn't just hide, they thrived. Deep within the limestone, workers carved out large-scale storage pits for grain and produce, ensuring that even if their surface crops were burned or seized, the community had enough reserves to survive for months. The presence of these silos, alongside communal wells, indicates that Nor was a fully self-sufficient city that could wait out even the longest sieges. The material used here, the white chalk of the Picardy Plains, presented a different set of challenges than the volcanic tuff found in other regions. While limestone is easy to excavate, it is highly sensitive to moisture and prone to internal collapses, if the weight of the ceiling is not managed correctly. The builders addressed this by carving the rooms with rounded, vated ceilings that naturally distributed the pressure of the earth above. They also utilized the natural capacity of the stone, to manage humidity, ensuring that the air remained breathable even when the complex was at its maximum capacity. The precision of these excavations reveals a deep passed-down knowledge of local geology that was essential for keeping the sanctuary from becoming a tomb. The layout of Nor suggests that life underground was intended to be as normal as possible. There are stone benches carved into the walls, mangers for the animals, and specialized rooms for the storage of grain and salted meats. Large communal ovens were built to provide bread for thousands, with the heat from these ovens being channeled through the same hidden smoke holes to keep the chambers warm during the cold French winters. This was not a temporary camp, but a fully realized urban center that supported life for months at a time, hidden beneath the agricultural fields that the inhabitants would return to once the danger had passed. One of the most human elements of the Nauru tunnels was documented during an extensive study conducted between 2014 and 2015 by the Service Archéologique Départemental d'Issam. During the survey, researchers documented over 3,000 individual pieces of graffiti left on the walls. While some date back to the Middle Ages, a significant portion was left by British and Australian soldiers during the First World War. For these men, the ancient tunnels served as a site of quiet respite behind the front lines of the Somme. The graffiti provides a bridge between different eras of conflict, showing that the same tunnels used by medieval villagers were later utilized as a safe haven by soldiers seeking shelter from modern artillery. These inscriptions offer a rare, intimate look at the lives of those who occupied the stone. Among the names and dates are sketches of loved ones, military insignia, and messages of hope. One particularly moving discovery was the signature of an Australian soldier who had carved his name and hometown, just days before he was deployed to the front. Researchers have been able to trace many of these soldiers back to their families in the United Kingdom and Australia, adding a layer of contemporary relevance to a site that was once considered a legend. This study transformed Niors from a local curiosity into an internationally significant archaeological site, proving that the subterranean world remained a vital part of the region's military and social strategy long after the original builders had passed away. As we examine the miles of white galleries, the mystery of Nors shifts from how it was built to how it was managed. Managing 3,000 people in a confined space requires strict social order and high-level logistical coordination. The existence of multiple wells within the tunnels ensures that the inhabitants had access to fresh water without ever having to venture to the surface. The way the tunnels are oriented allows for natural light to penetrate certain entrance galleries, helping the residents maintain a sense of the passage of time. Beyond the immediate tactical utility, there is evidence that the tunnels were used for illicit activities during times of peace. Local legends speak of smugglers using the complex to transport salt and other contraband across provincial borders to avoid heavy taxes. This underground trade network utilized the secret exits scattered across the plateau, some of which emerged inside private homes or hidden within wooded ravines. This suggests that the relationship between the villagers and their subterranean world was one of constant adaptation, moving between the roles of sanctuary and secret trade hub as the political climate changed. While the chalk sanctuaries of Nor were carved from the soft hills of France as a response to the chaos of medieval warfare, our journey now takes us east toward the rugged volcanic heart of central Turkey. In the region of Cappadocia, we move from a horizontal network of hiding places into a vertical metropolis of staggering depth. Here the earth is composed of soft volcanic tuff, a material that allowed ancient civilizations to carve not just rooms but entire vertical empires. Among the hundreds of subterranean sites discovered in this region, one stands as the undisputed titan of them all. Daranuyu was rediscovered by chance, music, in 1963, when a local man knocked down a wall in his basement and found a hidden gallery behind it. What he had actually stumbled upon was the entrance, music, to a city that reaches 18 stories deep into the earth, plunging 85 meters toward the water table. This was not a primitive cave system. It was a highly organized urban center, music, designed to house as many as 20,000 people, along with their livestock and food, music, supplies for months at a time. The complexity of the layout suggests that the builders possessed an advanced understanding of structural loads and subterranean logistics, creating a world that functioned with total independence from the surface. The origins of Daranuyu remain a subject of intense archaeological debate. Many researchers believe the initial excavation was started by the Frians, an Indo-European people, music, between the 8th and 7th centuries BC. These early builders likely sought refuge from the extreme seasonal shifts of the Anatolian plateau. Over the following centuries, the music city was significantly expanded, most notably by Byzantine-era Christians who utilized music. The network as a fortress against invading forces during the Arab-Byzantine Wars. Each successive culture that occupied the site added their own architectural layers, turning a series of storage cellars into a sprawling multi-level metropolis. As we descend into the upper levels, the atmospheric change is immediate. The temperature remains a constant 13 degrees Celsius, regardless of the scorching heat or freezing winters on the surface. These first floors were primarily used as stables and granaries. By keeping the livestock near the entrance, music, the residents reduced the smell and the logistical difficulty of moving animals through narrow music passages, while the animal heat helped warm the levels immediately above. Carved directly into the rock are mangers, troughs, and specialized stalls, music that show how integrated the animals were into the daily life of this underground society. Deeper into the rock, the city begins to reveal its social and industrial heart. Archaeologists have identified communal kitchens with large stone hearths, wine cellars equipped with vats for treading grapes, and oil presses used to process local harvests. The existence of these heavy industrial tools at such depths indicates that life in Daranuyu was intended to remain as normal as possible during times, of crisis. There were even religious spaces, including a large crucifix church on the 7th, level featuring an arched ceiling that mimics the traditional architecture found above ground. The builders were not merely surviving they were maintaining the cultural and social pillars of their civilization. The defensive engineering of Daranuyu is perhaps its most famous feature. Scattered throughout the tunnels are massive circular stone doors that look like millstones. These rolling doors were carved from a different, harder type of rock and moved, into place via specialized grooves. Each stone weighed up to 500 kilograms and featured a central hole that served two purposes. It allowed the defenders to see who was on the other side and provided a port for spears or projectiles. Crucially, these doors could only be opened, or closed from the inside. This design meant that even if an enemy breached the surface entrance, they would find themselves trapped in a series of narrow, music, dead-end corridors facing a succession of impassable stone barriers. Moving 20,000 people into the earth creates a massive logistical challenge primarily involving air and water. The solution was a masterclass, music, in ancient engineering, the central ventilation shaft. This main shaft drops 55 meters through the center of the city, acting as the primary lung for the entire complex. Smaller secondary shafts, music, branched off from this central column to reach the individual living quarters and communal rooms. Music, this system utilized natural convection to ensure that fresh air reached even the 18th level. The design was so effective that modern visitors can still breathe easily. Music at the lowest points of the city today. This central shaft also served as the city's primary well. However, the engineers, music, added a brilliant layer of security to the water supply. The well was designed so that the upper levels could access the water, but the shaft did not open to the surface at every floor. This prevented enemies on the surface from poisoning the water supply or cutting it off entirely. By isolating the well from the entrance points, the builders ensured that as long as they had air and food, they could hold out indefinitely against any siege. Beyond the practicalities of survival, some researchers point to an even older, music, and more mysterious origin for the Cappadocian network. There is a compelling theory linking these cities to the ancient texts of the Zoroastrian faith. The Vendidad, a section of the Avesta, describes a legendary king, music, named Yima, who was instructed by the creator to build a vara, a massive underground shelter. This shelter was intended to protect a chosen group of people, animals, and seeds from a series of fatal winters that would devastate the earth. While many view this as a mythological account of the last ice age, the structural descriptions of the vara bear a striking resemblance to the multi-level compartmentalized design of cities like Daranuyu. The sheer volume of rock removed to create the Cappadocian network is estimated to be in the millions of tons. This raises the question of where all that stone went. Unlike surface cities that leave mounds of rubble or debris, there is very little evidence of the excavated tuff on the surface surrounding Daranuyu. This has led to the idea that the debris was either spread thinly, music, across the agricultural fields to enrich the soil, or carried away to distant, music, locations to keep the city's location a secret. The level of coordination required to hide the evidence of such a massive, music, project suggests a society with a highly sophisticated military and, music, civic command structure. As we move through the narrow winding staircases that connect the levels, the transition, music, between different zones of activity is clear. Education was prioritized, evidenced by a large room on the second floor with a barrel-vaulted ceiling that served as a religious school. Study niches and benches carved into the walls show where students would have gathered. The city also featured communal dining halls where families would eat together, reinforcing the social bonds. Music needed to maintain order in a high-pressure subterranean environment. The sense of community was not an afterthought. It was an engineered necessity for psychological stability in a world without natural sunlight. Recent archaeological surveys have begun to use ground-penetrating radar to look for tunnels connecting Daranuyu to other nearby underground cities, such as Kaki. There is strong evidence to suggest that a tunnel nearly 10 kilometers long, music, may link these two massive complexes, forming a vast hidden highway system beneath, music, the Anatolian plains. If true, it would mean that Cappadocia was not just a collection of isolated shelters, but a unified subterranean province. The scale of this network suggests that the entire region was prepared to disappear into the earth at a moment's notice, leaving the surface entirely empty for an advancing enemy. This hidden highway allowed for the movement of people and supplies between cities without ever being spotted from the horizon. It speaks to a level of strategic planning, music, that we are only now beginning to map out in full. As lighter and other non-invasive technologies continue to scan, music, the region, the true extent of the Cappadocian network is expanding. We are finding that the cities we have already excavated might be just the beginning, with thousands of more rooms still filled with the silt and debris of centuries. The mystery of Daranuyu is not just in its construction, music, but in the low profile it maintained for over 1,000 years. It was a city, music, that existed in secret, a massive engineering project that successfully hid 20,000 people from the world. When the residents, music, finally left their tunnels for the last time, They left behind a footprint in the stone that tells a story of incredible resilience and technical skill. It remains music, a testament to the idea that when the surface of the earth becomes too dangerous, humanity has always had the ability to carve, music, a new path into the dark. As we leave the multi-layered urban depths of Anatolia, we travel across the Atlantic and high into the Andes Mountains of Colombia. Here, the subterranean world takes on a completely different texture, moving from the realm of survival into the realm of the sacred. We leave the dusty volcanic heart of Turkey for the Andes, where a mountain itself was transformed into a monument of huge proportions. Deep within the sultrich mountains of Zepaquira, 200 meters beneath the surface, lies a subterranean world that represents one of the most significant architectural achievements in South America. While our previous locations were defined by the need for survival or economic storage, the Mina de Sal de Zipaquira is a testament to the intersection of industrial grit and sacred ambition. Music. It is a sprawling complex carved entirely from halite rock salt, forming a cathedral of monumental proportions. Music that feels more like an engineered mountain than a traditional mine. The history of this site begins long before the first Spanish explorers set foot in the region. For centuries, the Muisca people, a highly organized indigenous civilization, held a monopoly over the salt trade in the high Altiplano. Music. To the Muisca, salt was more than a seasoning. It was a primary form of currency that allowed them to build a powerful and wealthy confederation. Music. They utilized traditional mining techniques to extract the white gold from the mountains, creating a network of tunnels that served as the foundation for the massive excavations we see today. When the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, they recognized the immense value of these deposits and expanded the mines into a full-scale industrial operation. Digging deeper into the heart of the Salt Mountain, the transition from a functional industrial site to a site of sacred architecture occurred in the mid-20th century. Miners, music, who worked in some of the most dangerous and claustrophobic conditions on Earth, began carving small altars into the salt walls as places for daily prayer. By the 1950s, this grassroots spiritual tradition evolved into a massive engineering, music, project to create a dedicated cathedral within the excavated voids of the mine. Music. This required a deep understanding of the unique structural properties of halite. Salt is an unusual material for large-scale construction. While it is incredibly strong under compression, it is also plastic. Music, meaning it has a tendency to creep or flow over long periods under the immense weight of the mountain above. Engineers had to design the cathedral's chambers with this physical reality in mind. The massive vated ceilings and towering pillars were not just aesthetic choices, music, but were necessary to distribute the geological pressure of the thousands of tons of rock overhead. By carving the salt into specific geometric shapes, they utilized the material's natural compressive, music, strength to prevent the chambers from collapsing. The result is a series, music, of three main naves representing the birth, life, and death of Christ, connected by a network of tunnels that simulate the path of a traditional pilgrimage. The sheer volume of salt removed to create these spaces is staggering, and yet the structure remains remarkably stable despite the continuous pressure from the surrounding mountain. One of the more fascinating aspects of the Zipper complex is the salt cathedral anomaly, a phenomenon involving the atmospheric pressure and the unique microclimate of the music mine. Because the cathedral is situated so deep underground, it maintains a constant temperature and humidity level that differs significantly from the surface. The salt walls naturally regulate the environment, absorbing excess moisture and creating air that is exceptionally pure. However, the mystery remains in how the structure survives the natural shifting of the salt deposits. Over decades, the salt creeps into the excavated voids, a process that should in theory slowly crush the cathedral. Regular structural monitoring is required to ensure that the naves remain open, as the mountain is essentially a living, moving entity that is constantly trying to reclaim the space. The sensory experience of the mine is a major part of its mystery. The walls are not the stark white of table salt, but are instead a deep translucent gray, marbled with minerals that catch the low cinematic lighting used to illuminate the naves. The air carries a faint, metallic scent of brine, music, and the acoustic properties of the salt chambers are unlike any other. Sound does not echo in the traditional sense. Music It is absorbed by the porous surfaces, creating a heavy, dampened silence that adds to the monumental feel of the space. This acoustic isolation was a key factor in the design, intended to remove the sounds of the active mining operations that continue in the levels both above and below the cathedral. Recent technological advancements have allowed us to see the Zipura complex in an entirely new light. A large-scale 3D mapping project has utilized specialized LAR and ground-penetrating radar to create music, a digital twin of the entire salt deposit. These scans have revealed music that the cathedral is only a small fraction of the total excavated volume. Beneath the public areas lie hidden levels, massive multi-story voids, left behind by centuries of industrial mining. Some of these chambers are so vast, music, that they could easily house entire modern buildings. The mapping has also identified previously unknown salt chimneys and geological faults that help explain how the mountain, music, manages the immense internal pressures without catastrophic failure. These digital maps have also shed light on the earlier Muska excavations, music, identifying sections of the mine that were worked by hand long before the introduction of modern explosives. These areas feature a different carving pattern, narrower, more organic tunnels that follow the richest veins of salt through the mountain. By comparing the ancient tunnels with the massive modern music naves, researchers can trace the evolution of mining technology and the shifting priorities of the cultures that have occupied the region. The salt mine is music, essentially a vertical timeline of Colombian history, with the oldest layers at the top music and the most modern engineering feats at the bottom. The complexity of the Zipura complex is not limited to the cathedral itself. The mine includes a series of 14 small chapels, each representing a station of the cross, music, carved into the tunnels leading to the main naves. Each station features unique architectural details from intricate bas-reliefs to massive stone crosses that appear to float within the dark voids of the salt. The level of detail achieved by the miners turned artists is remarkable, especially considering the difficult conditions under which the work was completed. They had to navigate the natural fissures in the salt, ensuring that each carving did not compromise the structural integrity of the tunnel. The relationship between the active mine and the cathedral is a delicate balance. While the cathedral is a major site for tourism and pilgrimage, the levels below remain a site of high-intensity industrial production. Every year, thousands of tons of salt are still extracted from the Zipura mountain, requiring a constant coordination between the engineers managing the tourist site and the miners operating heavy machinery in the depths. This coexistence is unique. It is a rare example of a historic site that, music, is physically growing and changing even as it is being preserved. The vibrations from the active mining, music, must be carefully monitored to ensure they do not cause fractures in the delicate salt carvings of the cathedral levels. As we move through the dark salt-laden air of Zipura, it becomes clear that this is more than just a mine or a place of worship. Music, it is an intersection of human ambition and geological reality. The people who carved these chambers, music, understood that to build something that would last in this environment, they had to work with the mountain rather than music against it. They utilized the very pressure that threatened to destroy the mind to hold the cathedral together, creating a monument that is as much a feat of physics as it is a work of art. Leaving the dark, salt-laden naves of Zipura, we travel thousands of miles east to the Mangostau region of Kazakhstan. We move from the high Andes to a vast windswept desert landscape where the horizon is defined by chalky white cliffs and rugged limestone plateaus. In this remote corner of Central Asia, the subterranean world takes on a form that is entirely spiritual. While our previous locations were defined by urban survival or industrial grit, the underground mosques of Mangostau represent a series of rock-cut empires designed for the solitary and the sacred. The Mangostau Peninsula was once a vital artery of the Silk Road, a place where merchants and travelers, music, sought refuge from the brutal climate of the Eurasian steppe during the medieval period. Particularly between the 9th and 12th centuries, this region sat at a crossroads of shifting empires and religious movements. Among these travelers were Sufi mystics who sought the isolation of the desert to pursue their spiritual practices. These individuals were often scholars and dervishes such as the legendary Chopanada and Shakpak Ada, who viewed the harsh wilderness as the perfect environment for asceticism and meditation. They didn't just build shrines. They carved entire mosques directly into the limestone faces of the mountains, creating permanent sanctuaries along the trade routes. Chakbaka, perhaps the most significant of these sites, represents a sophisticated transition from utilizing natural cavern formations to creating precision-cut architectural spaces. The limestone here is a unique geological canvas. It is relatively soft when first exposed, but hardens significantly over centuries of contact with the air. This allowed the Sufi builders to hollow out large communal spaces without the risk of immediate collapse. The layout of Shakbaka is unique in the Islamic world, featuring a distinct cross-shaped floor plan that has led some researchers to suggest earlier influences from historian Christianity or even older Zoroastrian traditions that once permeated the steppe. This architectural blending suggests that Mangostau was a melting pot of beliefs where the stone itself recorded the transition from ancient paganism to Islamic mysticism. The engineering of these mosques is deeply tied to the movement of the sun. The builders utilized natural light shafts, precisely cut vertical chimneys that pierce through the roof of the limestone mountain. These shafts are not randomly placed. They are designed to illuminate specific mabs or prayer niches during the spring and autumn equinoxes. This astronomical alignment served as a celestial clock, allowing the Sufi masters to track the passage of time and mark the most important dates in the spiritual calendar. When the sun reaches a specific point in the sky, a beam of light descends through the mountain, transforming the dark prayer hall into a space of brilliant, natural illumination. This mastery of light shows that the builders had a sophisticated understanding of both geometry and solar cycles, ensuring the mosque functioned as a living instrument of time. Modern-day archaeology in the region has focused on the preservation of these fragile sites. Recent studies by Kazakhstani archaeologists have utilized music, 3D laser scanning to document the thousands of inscriptions and petroglyphs found within the mosques. These scans have revealed that the sites were not built in a single era, but were continuously expanded over hundreds of years. The inscriptions range from Quranic verses to ancient tribal markings known, music, as tongas, which indicate that different nomadic clans took turns maintaining and protecting these sacred spaces. This collaborative effort across centuries shows that the mosques were more than just religious buildings. They were anchors for the social and political structure of the nomadic tribes of the Silk Road. The mystery of these sites is deepened by the presence of a vast necropolis surrounding the entrances. At sites like Chopin-Ata and Sultan-Epi, thousands of ancient stone graves and carved stele stretch across the desert floor, encircling the underground mosques. These are not merely cemeteries. They suggest that these locations were viewed as cities of the dead, as much as they were places for the living. The sheer number of burials indicates that being laid to rest near these subterranean sanctuaries was a matter of great spiritual importance. Comparison with other subterranean sites, like Daruyu, highlights a key difference. While Turkey's underground cities were built to hide the living, the Mangist mosques were built to honor the dead and connect them to the spiritual masters residing within the stone. The world at the time of their construction was one of constant movement. As the Mongol Empire expanded and later fractured, the Silk Road became a dangerous but profitable corridor. The Sufi mystics, who occupied these mosques, often acted as mediators and healers for the caravans passing through. They provided water from the subterranean systems and spiritual guidance for those embarking on the perilous journey across the plateau. The architecture reflects this dual role of sanctuary and service. The walls are pockmarked with thousands of small niches, originally intended for oil lamps, that would have guided travelers toward the safety of the mosque during the moonless desert nights. Managing the structural integrity of these limestone mosques required a sophisticated understanding of local geology. Limestone is porous and susceptible to erosion from the harsh desert winds and occasional flash floods. The builders addressed this by carving deep drainage channels and protective overhangs above the mosque entrances to divert water away from the delicate interior carvings. Inside, the walls were often smoothed to a fine finish, which helped to reflect the limited natural light and prevent the stone from flaking over time. This technical foresight has allowed these structures to remain largely intact despite centuries of exposure to one of the most demanding environments on Earth. As we examine the miles of white galleries and the silent prayer halls, the mystery of Mangostau shifts to the people who chose this life. The dervishes were not isolated from the world. They were the guardians of its most remote corners. Their work in the stone was an act of permanence in a nomadic world. Each pillar and vated ceiling was a statement of faith that the mountain would outlast the shifting sands, and the rise and fall of surface empires. The mosques stand today as a testament to a civilization that could find profound beauty and complex engineering within the monochromatic landscape of the desert. The history of Mangoshtau is a timeline of cultural intersection. While the Sufi mystics were the primary architects of the mosques we see today, the caves themselves often show signs of much older habitation. Some sites contain petroglyphs and inscriptions that date back to the Bronze Age, suggesting that these limestone formations have been viewed as significant for music millennia. Each successive group that occupied the region added their own layers to the stone, turning natural shelters into a unified network of rock-cut architecture that served the needs of both the body and the spirit. As we leave the silent Sunna-lined mosques of the Kazakh steppe, our journey takes us further south, moving away from the realm of the rock-cut sanctuary and toward a different kind of subterranean marvel. While the builders of Mangista hollowed out mountains to reach the divine, the engineers of medieval India turned the concept of architecture upside down, and so we reach the lush landscape of Gujarat, where the earth was open to reach the cooling depths of the water table. Here we find the monumental inverted skyscrapers known as stepwells. The most magnificent example of this tradition is Rani Ki Vav, or the Queen's Stepwell, located in the town of Patan. Constructed in the 11th century by Queen Udamati as a memorial to her husband, King Bhimdev I, this structure is not a building that rises into the sky, but one that plunges 7 stories into the ground. At over 64 meters long and 27 meters deep, it represents a massive excavation of the earth. Unlike the defensive tunnels of Europe or the hidden cities of Turkey, Rani Ki Vav was designed to be a public masterpiece, a subterranean cathedral that provided life-sustaining water while serving as a cultural and religious music hub. The primary purpose of a stepwell was water management. In the semi-arid climate of Gujarat, where monsoon rains are seasonal and the heat of the sun can be relentless, reaching the permanent water table was essential for survival. By building a series of wide descending stairs that led down to a deep circular well, the architects ensured that water was accessible regardless of the season. As the water level fluctuated throughout the year, the steps provided a pathway to reach the liquid at any depth. However, the builders of Rani Kav transformed this functional necessity into an artistic achievement, lining the walls with some of the most intricate stone carvings ever produced in the ancient world. The engineering required to stabilize a 7-story hole in the ground was significant. The builders had to manage the lateral pressure of the surrounding soil, which constantly threatens to push inward and collapse the structure. They addressed this by creating a series of multi-pillared pavilions at each level. These stone beams and pillars act as a complex bracing system, distributing the weight of the earth across the entire framework. As you descend further into the well, the architecture becomes more robust with larger pillars and thicker walls designed to withstand the increasing geological pressure. As you move down through the levels, the atmosphere changes in a way that is immediately noticeable. This is the cooling effect of the stepwell. The thermal mass of the surrounding earth, combined with the presence of deep water at the bottom, creates a microclimate that is significantly music, different from the surface. On a day when the temperatures in Gujarat might reach 45 degrees Celsius, the lowest levels of Rani Kav remained 10 degrees cooler. This made the stepwell a vital social retreat. People would gather on the lower landings to escape music, the midday heat, turning the well into a subterranean town square where news was exchanged and community bonds were reinforced. The sheer scale of the artistic work at Rani Kav is a mathematical and logistical puzzle. There are over 500 principal sculptures and over 1,000 minor ones depicting deities, celestial beings, and geometric, music, patterns. These were not carved into the walls after the well was dug. They were sculpted onto individual blocks of sandstone and then meticulously assembled like a giant jigsaw puzzle deep underground. The precision required to ensure that these thousands of pieces fit together while maintaining the structural integrity of the 7-story descent is a testament to the skill of the Solanki-era masons. The mystery of Rani Kav is tied to its disappearance. Not long after its completion, the nearby Saraswati River, music, which fed the local water table, shifted its course due to a major geological or tectonic music event. This shift caused massive flooding that carried incredible volumes of silt into the stepwell. Music, instead of destroying the site, the silt filled the entire 7-story cavity, packing it tight and burying it completely. For nearly 700 years, the Queen's stepwell vanished from the physical world, existing music only as a local legend. It was not until the late 20th century that the Archaeological Survey of India began a full-scale excavation. As they removed thousands of tons of sand and river silt, they discovered that the very material that had buried the site had also served as its greatest protector. Because it was sealed away from the air, the sun, and the wind, the sandstone carvings remained in near-perfect condition. When the bottommost levels were finally cleared, the sculptures appeared as if they had been finished only yesterday, their sharp edges and fine details untouched by the erosion that has weathered almost every other monument from the same period. Recent studies by hydrologists and geologists have attempted to map the original flow of the Saraswati River to understand why such a massive structure was built in this specific location. The data suggests that Rani Kivav was part of a larger regional water management system that linked several stepwells and reservoirs together. By looking at the sediment layers, researchers can see the exact moment the river turned, showing a sudden transition from a stable environment to a chaotic flood event. This geological record preserved within the walls of the well provides a rare look at how ancient civilizations had to adapt to a landscape that could, music, change overnight. Beyond the water and the art, there is a technical brilliance in the way the light, music, is managed. Even at the lowest levels, the well is never completely dark. The wide opening at the top, music, and the open pavilion design of the landings allow natural light to filter down, illuminating the sculptures in a way that shifts throughout the day. At noon, the light reaches the very bottom, striking the water and reflecting back onto the carved ceilings. This was a deliberate choice intended to highlight the transition from the mundane world of the surface to the sacred world of the water table. As we walk through the levels of Rani Kivav, we see an architecture that is the literal opposite of the pyramids or the towering cathedrals of Europe. Here, greatness was achieved by moving into the earth. The site remains a monument to a culture that viewed the ground beneath their feet as a space for high-level engineering and music, profound beauty. It shows that even in an environment as challenging as the Indian desert, the right combination of math and art could create a sanctuary that survived being buried for centuries. As we leave the inverted skyscrapers of India, we cross back toward the African music continent to the rugged highlands of Ethiopia. While the engineers of Gujarat carved music downward to reach water, the architects of our next location moved into the earth to create a terrestrial version of a holy city. We leave the sandstone pillars of the stepwells for the red volcanic rock of Libella, where entire churches were hewn from a single piece of stone, remaining invisible from the horizon until you are standing directly above them. In the rugged Lasta Mountains of northern Ethiopia, the ground opens up to reveal a series of structures that defy the standard rules of construction. This is Libella, a site where 11 medieval churches were not built from the ground up, but were instead hunted directly out of the living red volcanic rock. At an altitude of over 2,500 meters, these buildings are entirely monolithic, meaning each one is a single continuous piece of stone, still connected to the earth from which it was carved. Standing on the surface, you can look down onto the roofs of these cathedrals, seeing them as they were meant to be seen, as monuments, music, that exist entirely within the negative space of the mountain. The creation of Libella was a feat of top-down engineering that required a flawless understanding of structural physics. The process began with workers carving a deep trench into the basalt, music, isolating a massive rectangular block of stone in the center. Once this central monolith was free from the surrounding cliff, the stonemasons worked from the roof downward, hollowing out the interior and carving intricate windows, columns, and arches. There was no room for error. A single misplaced strike of the chisel could compromise the integrity of a pillar or a vated ceiling. And since the stone could not be replaced, the entire design had to be perfectly visualized before the first inch of soil was removed. Connecting these 11 churches is a sprawling network of subterranean trenches and tunnels. This labyrinth served a dual purpose, acting as a highly efficient drainage system during the heavy Ethiopian monsoons, and as a secure path for the movement of the royal court and clergy. By moving through these dark, narrow passages, the inhabitants could travel between the different sacred sites without ever emerging onto the surface. This hidden infrastructure effectively turned the entire area into a unified subterranean city, where the geological features were manipulated to provide both spiritual sanctuary and logistical ease. One of the most striking features of this layout is the artificial waterway known as the Jordan River. This deep trench was engineered to divide the northern and southern groups of churches, mimicking the geography of the Holy Land. King Labilla, the ruler of the Zagwe dynasty, who commissioned the project in the 12th century, intended for this site to be a new Jerusalem for those who could not make the long and dangerous pilgrimage to the actual city. The river is not just a symbolic, music, boundary set. It is a functional piece of hydraulic engineering that channels rainwater away from the foundations of music, the churches, preventing the soft volcanic tuff from becoming unstable. The mystery that has long surrounded Labella involves the time frame of its construction. Local legends suggest that the project was completed in just a few decades with the assistance of angels who worked through the night to double the progress of the human laborers. However, modern archaeology offers a more grounded but equally impressive explanation. The 12th century Zagwe dynasty possessed the ability to mobilize a massive, highly skilled labor force of thousands of stonemasons, engineers, music, and laborers. By analyzing the tool marks left on the stone, researchers have identified distinct, music, phases of construction, suggesting that the site evolved over several generations as different kings expanded upon the original vision. Despite the durability of the volcanic rock, the passage of time and the harsh, high-altitude climate have taken a toll on the structures. Recent studies conducted, music, by UNESCO and the World Monuments Fund have utilized advanced geological imaging to assess the structural stability of the churches. These reports have identified internal fissures and cracks within the basalt, music, caused by centuries of seismic activity and the natural expansion and contraction of the stone due to temperature shifts. In some cases, massive protective shelters have been erected, music, to shield the roofs from further water erosion, while conservationists work to stabilize the internal pillars that support the immense weight of the mountain overhead. The interior of the churches reveals a level of detail that is difficult to reconcile with the limitations of the era. Inside Bayat Medain Oma, the largest of the monolithic churches, massive rows of columns support a vaulted roof, all carved from the same single block of stone as the exterior walls. The walls are decorated with faded fresco and relief carvings that blend Byzantine influences with local Ethiopian artistic traditions. Because the stone is porous, the air inside remains cool and carries the faint scent of ancient incense, music, creating an environment that feels disconnected from the heat and wind of the surface world above. The logistical challenge of removing millions of tons of excavated stone remains a point of interest for researchers. Unlike a traditional construction site, where building materials are brought in, the architects of Labella had to find a way to dispose of the debris without burying the very trenches they were digging. It is believed that the excavated rock was used to create the paved pathways and music. Secondary buildings on the surface, or was carried away to reinforce the surrounding hillsides. The sheer cleanliness of the site today suggests a level of site management and organizational discipline, music, that was necessary to keep such a massive project on track over the course of many years. Archaeologists have also begun to investigate the residential areas surrounding the church complex. Recent excavations have uncovered the remains of two-story circular stone houses that date back to the same period as the churches. These findings suggest that Labella was a bustling urban center with a permanent population of priests, craftsmen, and officials who lived in the shadow of the monumental excavations. The relationship between the sacred subterranean spaces, music, and the daily life on the surface indicates that this was not just a secluded monastery, but a vibrant capital city designed to represent the power and music, piety of the Zagwe kings. The architectural style of the churches also provides clues about Ethiopia's historical connections to the wider world. Some of the windows in Bayat Mariam feature carved symbols and interlaced patterns that are similar to those found in early Christian sites in the Mediterranean and the Middle East. This suggests that the engineers of Labella were not working in isolation. Music, they were part of a sophisticated global exchange of ideas adapting international architectural trends to music fit the unique geological realities of the Ethiopian highlands. The result is a style that is uniquely African, yet part of a broader historical narrative of early Christendom. Now it's your turn. Let us know below which of these subterranean wonders fascinated you most. We are just beginning to scratch the surface of our planet's forgotten history. And to make sure you don't miss our upcoming deep dives into the ancient world, double-check you've subscribed and turned on notifications. Your support allows us to continue bringing amazing stories to light. And so, as always, until next time, stay curious. Give 80 imag old, tarding imag promite banner ka diania.